Ladies and gentlemen, I volunteered to give the speech today at IBPG because I know there's quite often a shortage of speakers when it's the busy season, as it is for many of us. And moreover, I felt there was an interesting topic that I haven't seen mentioned before at the practice group. It's the topic of gun control in the United States. And of course, this is a subject that is sadly topical with what's transpired across the pond over the past few weeks. I'm sure you'll all be aware, if you keep up with the news, that there was yet another mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, a few weeks ago at Stoneman Douglas High School, and in total 17 people were killed. The assassin was later caught and shot dead. It's such a sad speech to have to put together because in doing my research I had to take notes of the number of dead at different mass shootings, the number that were children, the number that were adults, the number of people injured, and it was quite chilling because you're writing down these cold, calculated notes about such a horrific event. But indeed, this whole mass shooting affair seems to have become something quite run-of-the-mill in the United States. It's become a fact of life there, horribly so. And this is something that we've become used to in a way, much like many terrorist acts across Europe as well. I was reading an article on this, and the reporter talks about how he goes through the same process every time there's a mass shooting. He verifies the reports, checks up on the sources, he writes a What We Know article, and that's it. It's same old, business as usual. But this time, it seems that the country may actually be on the brink of real change with this last mass shooting at Stoneman Douglas in Florida, where 17 people were killed. The mass shooting caused an uproar across the country, with many marches taking place, most notably the March for Our Lives, which was held last Saturday in Washington, D.C., the capital, with over 500,000 people in attendance, including my best friend who lives there, who told me all about it. There were a lot of notable young speakers at the march. The speaker that we've all been hearing about over the past few weeks is, of course, Emma Gonzalez, a very young student who witnessed the shooting, who witnessed her friends being murdered and was able to escape, and who's become quite a prominent political figure in her own right since then. So I'm going to read a quote from what she said at the march with reference to those in power. And I'll start the quote now. "Politicians sitting in their seats, funded by the National Rifle Association, telling us nothing could have ever been done to prevent this, we call bullshit. They say that tougher gun laws do not decrease gun violence, but we call bullshit. They say a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. We call bullshit. They say guns are just tools like knives and are as dangerous as cars. We call bullshit. They say that no laws could have been able to prevent the hundreds of senseless tragedies that have occurred. We call bullshit." End quote. It's quite powerful to hear these words spoken because to us this problem is in many ways so foreign. We have such strict gun laws. It's illegal to own a gun in many European countries. So we don't really live with the realities of the possibility of this happening. That's why I mentioned terrorism earlier, because I think it's an approximation of what people might be feeling in this situation. So I'm going to go through 5 points of what America needs to do to find a solution to this gun problem. And here they are, I'll dive right in. The fact is that America has a unique gun violence problem. There are many more gun deaths in America than in other developed nations. And there are also far higher levels of gun ownership than any other country in the world. For instance, the United States has nearly 6 times the gun homicide rate of Canada, more than 7 times that of Sweden, and nearly 16 times that of Germany. And in fact, all these gun deaths contribute to the fact that overall there are far higher murder rates in the United States than in other developed countries. Mass shootings, in fact, make up a small fraction of this murder rate, which in a way is even more alarming because of how horrific they are. In fact, it's only comparable in this regard to quasi-failed states like, think of Yemen or other countries that have been so completely ripped apart by war that it's almost impossible for us to put them on an equal footing with a country like the United States. So guns contribute massively to violence and to the murder rate. That's the first issue that America will have to face up to. The second issue that it's important to underline is the fact that guns are the problem, not mental illness, as is so often alleged. If you're mentally ill and you have access to a gun, you can do much more damage than if you're mentally ill and you have no access to a gun. That goes without saying. But so often, the government wields this argument of there being an issue with mental illness. This person was mentally ill. We might look at why this is so often used by the American government. Let's not forget that the National Rifle Association is a powerful lobby that funds a significant portion of the government, that feeds into the different political parties, and that has far too much of a say in the way politics happen in the United States. And they're also feeding into this mental illness smokescreen when it comes to guns. Then we come to the issue of gun control, which is of course really at the heart of the matter. America is unwilling to tighten gun control laws, and there's only so much that can be done at state level. The fact is that gun control works. Look at the issue, for example, look at the example of Australia. There was a mass shooting about 20 years ago in Australia, and after that, the Australian government responded with legislation that banned certain types of guns and that confiscated hundreds of thousands of guns. They took action, they cracked down, and it worked. They drove down the rates of gun-related violence considerably. This is something that could apply to the United States as well, despite the differences in population and demographics and so forth. But for this to happen, there will need to be action at the federal level, across the country, and not just at state and local level. For instance, take Chicago, which is a city with very tight gun laws, due in large part to the gang violence the city has experienced. Chicago has the strictest gun laws in the United States, but it's done nothing really to solve the problem. It still has high levels of gun violence, and this points to the fact that deeper gun control is needed across the country. If you want to buy a gun in Chicago, you need ID, you need to prove that you have a permit to own a gun, you need to go through a background check, and you've got a 3-day waiting period. That's pretty tight laws. It seems like they might work. If you compare it to another state, such as Indiana, also in the Midwest, none of this is required to purchase a gun. So someone from Chicago can drive to Indiana, buy a gun with no checks, go back and commit whatever type of violence that they like. And this is proof that more needs to be done at the federal level. This brings me to my last argument, which is the fact that America needs to go further than anyone wants to admit. You'll have heard of the Second Amendment to the American Constitution. This amendment sets out that people have the right to bear firearms. This Second Amendment was added at a time when there were gangs across the country, at a time when America was just fresh out of its war with Britain, the colonizing power. So really, these gun laws go back hundreds of years and are mostly irrelevant to the way the country is run today. But the fact is this. The fundamental problem is that America has too many guns. So what policies need to do is cut the number of guns in circulation right now to reduce gun deaths. That is the first step. You can't achieve that with stricter background checks or stricter controls on who can buy a gun now. You just need to get rid of the guns that are already out there. But the US, for political, cultural, and legal reasons, notably the Second Amendment is a legal issue, seems to be unable to take the action that it really needs. For now, it's foreseeable that the country will continue to take milder measures at the state and local level, and we can keep hoping in the meantime that those present at the March for Our Lives, the victims, those affected by gun violence, will continue to put in the work needed to perhaps finally create change when it comes to gun control in the United States. Thank you.